It was just after 6 a.m. when the first cement truck roared up the narrow cul-de-sac of Maple Ridge Estates. Neighbors peeked through blinds, coffee halfway to their lips, as 9 more trucks lined up behind it like a convoy headed for war. By the time the sun cleared the oak trees, Jeffrey Wright's acre of land, the one his late father had saved 30 years to buy, was buried beneath a thick, wet sea of concrete. And by the end of that same week, the woman who ordered it all, Evelyn Marks, the iron-fisted vice president of the Homeowners Association, would be at Jeffrey's door in tears, begging for mercy. No one in the quiet Ohio suburb of Fairview could yet imagine how their picture-perfect neighborhood was about to become the center of one of the most unsettling HOA disputes in state history. Maple Ridge Estates was a sore place realtors sold using words like charming, tight-knit, and secure. Each lawn was a competition in symmetry. Each mailbox gleamed like a trophy. Even the trash cans, painted a uniform shade of pine green, were wheeled to the curb at the same exact angle every Thursday morning. The HOA bylaws ran longer than most novels, 178 pages covering everything from acceptable mailbox fonts to the required height of hedges. For most residents, that was fine. They had traded freedom for predictability. Believing rules kept the chaos of the outside world at bay. But then came Jeffrey Wright. Jeffrey was 42, a machinist and small-time contractor from Dayton. After losing his wife to breast cancer 2 years earlier, he wanted peace and open air for his teenage son, Malik. He bought Lot 47 at the far edge of Maple Ridge Estates, nearly an acre, technically outside the manicured core of the subdivision, but still under the HOA's reach. The lot had been empty for years. Jeffrey planned to build a small workshop and plant fruit trees. He imagined Malik helping him on weekends, learning the value of working with his hands. To the board, though, Jeffrey was a disruption. A man whose pickup truck bore mud instead of polish, whose hands were callous instead of cuff-linked. When he moved in that March, he didn't know that the woman next door, Evelyn Marks, ran Maple Ridge like a small empire. Evelyn was 61. Silver hair coiled into a bun tight enough to pull her features into permanent disapproval. She'd been HOA vice president for nearly a decade, though everyone knew she was a real power behind the title. Her husband, Peter, a retired accountant, mostly stayed silent at meetings. Evelyn didn't need his voice. She prided herself on maintaining order. Disorder meant decay, and she had a sixth sense for spotting it. An unapproved fence post, a garden hose left visible, a color of door paint 2 shades off regulation, Birch Whisper number 13. When Jeffrey started clearing his land, cutting back overgrown brush, hauling old debris, Evelyn's pulse ticked faster. The sound of chainsaws was not, in her view, part of suburban tranquility. She called the HOA president twice that week. She even snapped photos from her upstairs window, unlicensed construction activity. She labeled them in a folder on her desktop. But Jeffrey was working legally. He had his county permits. His land was zoned residential like commercial. The HOA, technically, had no authority to interfere. Still, Evelyn saw the trucks, the lumber, the dirt piles, and decided she would. The letter came on creamy stationery embossed with the HOA seal. Dear Mr. Wright, it has come to the association's attention that you are conducting commercial activity on residential property in violation of Section 9, subsection B of the Community Code. You are hereby instructed to cease all building and land modification activities until reviewed by the board. Jeffrey read it twice, then tossed it on the counter. Dad, they can't tell you what to do, Malik said. They'll try, Jeffrey muttered. He sent a polite reply with copies of his permits. 2 days later, a second letter arrived. This one marked final notice. The HOA demanded he remove all equipment from the property or face enforcement action. Jeffrey ignored it. That summer, the real war began. Every week brought something new. Anonymous complaints about noise, citations for unsightly storage, fines that doubled every 10 days. Evelyn attended the hearings herself, reading from a binder thicker than a Bible. But Jeffrey refused to bend. He attended one meeting in person, 6 board members staring at him from behind a folding table. I'm not breaking any laws, he said. You don't own my land. Evelyn's voice never rose. This neighborhood has standards, Mr. Wright. If you can't meet them, Perhaps this isn't the right community for you." A silence followed, the kind that fills a courtroom right before a sentence is handed down. Jeffrey left before the meeting ended. That night, someone slashed his truck tires. 2 weeks later, an envelope with no return address arrived in Jeffrey's mailbox. Inside was a typed note. "She's planning something big. Protect yourself. Watch the trucks." He turned the note over. Nothing. He showed it to Malik, who frowned. "Trucks? What trucks?" Jeffrey shrugged. Maybe it was a prank. But he kept the note pinned to the fridge. That same weekend, Evelyn met with the HOA treasurer and a local construction contact. What she ordered would shock even those who'd known her iron will for years. It happened on a Tuesday. At 5:55 a.m., the first rumble echoed to the neighborhood, deep, mechanical, steady. Jeffrey thought it was thunder until his son shouted, "Dad, look!" Down the road, an orange and white cement mixer rolled toward their driveway, followed by another, and another. 10 trucks in total. The drivers, contracted through a company called Ridgewood Industries, carry work orders stamped with the HOA logo and Evelyn Marks' electronic signature. The instructions were clear. Pour base foundation on Lot 47. HOA authorized cleanup and surface stabilization. Before Jeffrey could stop them, wet concrete began gushing onto his soil. He screamed, ran, waved his arms. The foreman held up a clipboard. "We're just following orders, sir." By the time police arrived, the land was a slab of gray, 200 cubic yards of cement hardening in the morning sun. Local news showed up within hours. Drones hovered overhead. Footage of Jeffrey standing on the slab, shaking his head in disbelief, aired on the 6 o'clock news. Reporters called it the concrete war. The HOA denied wrongdoing. Evelyn told cameras it was a miscommunication with the contractors, a necessary erosion control project that went awry. But Jeffrey had proof the order came from her personal email. When he hired an attorney, Evelyn's tone changed. She called twice, no answer. Then she appeared at his door, tear-streaked, clutching a checkbook. "Please, Jeffrey," she whispered. "Let's make this go away." He closed the door without a word. Detective Linda Shaw of the Fairview County Sheriff's Office had seen her share of neighborhood feuds, but nothing like this. At first, it looked civil, property damage, maybe fraud. But then she found the payment trail. Evelyn had authorized $43,000 from the HOA Reserve Fund for emergency landscaping. The HOA treasurer claimed he was told the board had voted. They hadn't. Evelyn had forged the minutes. Emails revealed she'd worked with a contractor cousin to arrange the pour overnight. Her motive? To protect property values, she wrote in one message. But deeper down, there was something uglier. Neighbors began whispering what no one wanted to say on camera, that Evelyn had never liked the idea of a black man owning land at the edge of her perfect neighborhood. At meetings, she'd made veiled comments. "We want homeowners who fit the community's look." One former board member told investigators Evelyn said Jeffrey's kind of property would change the tone of the block. When confronted, Evelyn denied it all. "I just care about standards," she said. "This has nothing to do with race." But the email spoke louder. One draft, unsent but recovered from her hard drive, read, "If we don't act fast, that workshop will attract more of them." The county prosecutor's office took notice. The story spread beyond Ohio. Civil rights groups called for her resignation. Protesters marched outside Maple Ridge's gate holding signs reading "Cemented in Hate" and "Land is a right, not a privilege." Jeffrey tried to keep his head down. He worked double shifts to pay legal fees, his once quiet property now a media circus. Malik struggled in school. Classmates repeated things her parents said over dinner. Jeffrey filed a civil lawsuit for property destruction, defamation, and discrimination. But Evelyn wasn't finished yet. Weeks later, Jeffrey received notice of a counterclaim. Evelyn alleged he had harassed her, citing verbal threats and disturbing social media activity. Her lawyer, a sharp-tongued former city attorney, filed motions so thick the case dragged on for months. Behind the scenes, Evelyn's marriage crumbled. Peter Marks moved into a motel, later telling a reporter he'd married a woman obsessed with control. When the HOA voted to suspend her, Evelyn broke down at the meeting, shaking, pale, pleading to keep her title. It was the first crack in the marble mask she'd worn for decades. Detective Shaw spent weeks tracing every email, payment, and permit Evelyn had touched. One detail bothered her: the cement company's dispatch time. Records showed the order was placed at 2:13 a.m., hours after the HOA office closed. Someone had used Evelyn's credentials remotely, but the IP address didn't match her home. It came from an address 3 miles away, the home of a man named Paul Hendricks, the HOA treasurer who claimed innocence. When questioned, Paul folded. He admitted Evelyn had convinced him to help approve the transaction. In exchange, she promised to secure him a maintenance contract. But Paul swore he hadn't known she planned to destroy Jeffrey's land. He thought it was just a grading project. Shaw wasn't convinced. 2 months into the investigation, Evelyn called Jeffrey again. Against his lawyer's advice, he recorded the conversation. In the recording, Evelyn's voice trembles. "I just wanted to scare you a little. You don't understand what it's like keeping order here. They expect perfection. I can fix this. Just please don't ruin me." Jeffrey asks, "Why me?" Silence. Then a whisper, "Because you didn't belong." That tape became the heart of the prosecution's case. Fairview County Courthouse overflowed when State versus Evelyn Marks began. The charges: property destruction, criminal mischief, falsification of public documents, and civil rights intimidation. Evelyn sat rigid at the defense table, pearls glinting under fluorescent lights. Jeffrey testified calmly, though his hands shook when he described watching the cement pour. Malik testified too, his voice small but steady. "She looked at us like we were dirty." The jury deliberated for 3 days. Verdict: guilty on all counts except one. Sentencing was set for late November. But before that day came, Evelyn disappeared. On November 10th, Peter Marks arrived at his wife's attorney's office with her wedding ring and a note that read only, "I can't face them." Her car was later found abandoned near the Scioto River. Inside, her phone, purse, and a half-empty bottle of anxiety medication. The river search lasted a week. Nothing. The case file was marked missing, presumed deceased. But Detective Shaw wasn't convinced. A security camera half a mile from the river showed a figure matching Evelyn's build stepping into a silver sedan, driven by someone else. The plate was registered to Ridgewood Industries, the same company that poured the cement. 3 months later, Ridgewood Industries went bankrupt amid fraud allegations. Its owner, Caleb Knox, fled the state. When federal agents raided his Columbus warehouse, they found storage lockers containing falsified invoices, blank HOA checks, and one hard drive labeled Maple R47 docs. Inside were dozens of documents linking Evelyn to multiple HOA kickback schemes. She'd approved fake maintenance projects for years, siphoning money through shell accounts. The concrete pour wasn't an act of madness. It was a cover-up. She needed to erase physical evidence of prior soil testing that might expose environmental violations tied to her and Knox. Jeffrey's land had been sitting atop the proof. By the time the FBI pieced it together, Evelyn had already resurfaced in Kentucky under an alias. She was arrested outside a motel, broke and disheveled. In custody, she asked to call Jeffrey. He agreed under supervision. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. Evelyn sobbed through most of it. "I never hated you," she said. "I hated what you reminded me of, that I wasn't in control." Jeffrey didn't reply. Her sentencing was postponed twice due to psychological evaluation. Maple Ridge estates collapsed under lawsuits. Home values dropped 40%. Residents argued in public, accusing one another of complicity. The HOA dissolved within a year. Jeffrey sold what was left of his land to the county for reclamation. The concrete slab was too costly to remove. He and Malik moved north, trying to start fresh. Detective Shaw transferred to another department, but kept the file open. "I don't think she poured that cement just to hurt him," she said in an interview. "I think she was hiding something bigger." In 2024, a construction crew began demolishing Ridgewood Industries' old headquarters. Under the cracked floor of a storage bay, they discovered a sealed metal drum. Inside were 3 items: a stack of HOA financial records, a burned flash drive labeled Project E47, and a photograph of Evelyn Marks, standing beside two men unknown to authorities, one of them wearing a county inspector's badge. The serial number on that badge traced to an official still employed by the Fairview County Building Department. Detective Shaw reopened the file. She called Jeffrey that night. "Mr. Wright," she said, "I think we finally know why she poured that concrete, and it's bigger than either of us imagined." It was early spring when the Fairview County Sheriff's Department reopened the file. Detective Linda Shaw stood in the evidence room, staring at the metal drum pulled from Ridgewood Industries' demolished warehouse. The contents had been cataloged and sealed by the FBI. Financial records, a burned flash drive, and a photo of Evelyn Marks with two men, one wearing a Fairview County Building Department badge. The label on the flash drive read only Project E47. When Shaw plugged it in, most of the files were corrupted. But one folder opened, site documentation, Lot 47. Her screen filled with images, topographic scans, soil samples, permit diagrams, and something else. Blurred radiographs of barrels buried deep under the same plot of land Evelyn had ordered cemented over. One document stood out. Memo, internal use only. Project E47/Ridgewood Environmental. Subject property to be sealed permanently after secondary containment failure. Shaw felt her stomach tighten. Secondary containment failure meant chemical leakage, or something far worse. Jeffrey Wright's property wasn't just a victim of a feud. It might have been a crime scene long before he ever arrived. The county archives painted a ghostly picture. Lot 47 hadn't always belonged to Maple Ridge Estates. Decades ago, before the subdivision existed, the land had been leased to a small industrial contractor tied to a company called Coleman Environmental. Their records vanished in 1996 after a fire destroyed the company's local branch. But one surviving ledger, recovered from a storage facility, listed waste barrel operations across several Ohio counties, including a site identified as Parcel 47, Ridgewood Sector E. Shaw ran the names connected to that operation. One jumped out immediately. Arthur M. Coleman, CEO of Coleman Environmental, now a powerful developer with federal contracts. She remembered seeing his name once before, on a campaign donation list, right beside Evelyn Marks. Jeffrey had tried to put Fairview behind him. He and Malik had rented a small duplex outside Cleveland, far from the cameras. When Shaw called, his first reaction was silence. "Detective, that place is nothing but pain for us," he said. "I don't want anything to do with it." "I understand," Shaw replied, "but this isn't about the HOA anymore. I think Evelyn covered up something much bigger, and your name's in those files." A week later, Jeffrey drove back to Fairview. The once pristine subdivision was a ghost of itself. Cracked driveways, brown lawns, for sale signs leaning in the wind. The slab of concrete still sat on his old property, weather-stained and silent. Standing there, he felt something he hadn't since that awful day. Curiosity mixed with dread. "What did you bury, Evelyn?" he whispered. Detective Shaw's partner, Officer Raymond Sutter, a quiet veteran with a background in environmental enforcement, joined the reopened investigation. They cross-referenced the Project E47 memo against EPA archives and uncovered restricted incident code, Ridgewood Disposal Anomaly, 1993. The report was thin, heavily redacted, but it mentioned chemical storage drums unaccounted for and containment breach during transfer. Two supervisors were listed. One of them, Miguel Ortiz, now a state inspector. The other, Evelyn Marks. Detective Shaw drove to Miguel Ortiz's home in Columbus. The man was in his early 50s now, grayer but sharp. When she showed him the memo, his expression changed, a flicker of recognition, then guilt. "I knew this would come back," he murmured. He told her that in 1993, Coleman Environmental had contracted Ridgewood Industries to bury leaking drums of industrial solvent. Evelyn, then a junior compliance officer, was sent to oversee cleanup. But instead of reporting the leak, the team covered it with soil and falsified the inspection. The buried barrels were supposed to be retrieved later. They never were. By the time the subdivision went up, Ortiz said she probably figured concrete was the easiest tombstone. Shaw recorded every word. When she left, Ortiz handed her a faded photograph, a dirt lot, bulldozers in the background, and Evelyn standing beside a man whose face was half obscured. "That's Coleman," Ortiz said. "He's the one who paid us to shut up." Environmental testing teams drilled into the edge of Jeffrey's old property under court order. At 10 feet deep, sensors picked up metallic resonance. They drilled again. This time, the core sample came up streaked with rust and chemical residue. Hazmat crews moved in with protective suits. Hours later, they unearthed the first barrel, and then another. But between them, they found something no one expected: a human bone. The remains were sent for forensic analysis. DNA matched a missing persons report from 1993. Samuel Hartley, a Ridgewood subcontractor who'd vanished after threatening to blow the whistle on Coleman Environmental's illegal dumping. Detective Shaw pieced it together. Evelyn and Coleman buried not just waste, but the man who knew too much. The question now was whether his death had been an accident or murder. Evelyn Marks sat in a psychiatric ward in Louisville awaiting transfer. Since her capture, she'd spoken little. When Shaw visited, Evelyn was thinner, eyes hollow, her once immaculate posture collapsed into frailty. Shaw placed photos of the excavation on the table. Evelyn stared at them for a long time, then whispered, "I told him to stop digging." "Who?" Shaw asked. "Samuel," she said. "He wasn't supposed to be there that night." Coleman said the job was done. Then the ground gave way and she broke off, trembling. He was alive when the first drum went down. Shaw felt cold spread through her chest. "So you covered it?" Evelyn nodded weakly. "We poured soil, then later, concrete. I thought it would stay buried." Prosecutors struck a deal. Evelyn would testify against Coleman in exchange for leniency. But Coleman had money, influence, and connections stretching through state government. When indictment papers were ready, he vanished. Private jet flight plan canceled midair, phone disconnected. Within days, his corporate offices were stripped bare. Investigators later found he'd transferred millions through offshore accounts weeks before Evelyn's arrest. Shaw knew what it meant. Someone had warned him. 3 nights later, Jeffrey's temporary apartment in Cleveland was broken into. Nothing was stolen, except a cardboard box labeled Fairview Files. Inside that box had been copies of the Project E-47 documents and Evelyn's recorded confession. The intruders had used lockpicks, left no fingerprints, and cut the power to the security camera. Jeffrey moved Malik to his sister's house the next day. "I can't keep doing this," he told Shaw. "I thought it was over." "It's not over," Shaw said quietly. "And that's exactly why we need you." On May 18th, Evelyn Marks was scheduled to be transferred from Kentucky to Fairview County Jail to testify before a grand jury. The convoy never arrived. At 2:47 a.m., state troopers found the transport van abandoned along I-71. Doors open, driver unconscious but alive. Evelyn was gone. No trace, no struggle, no blood. Just a scent of diesel, tire tracks leading to a secondary vehicle, and a single item left on the passenger seat: a cement trowel, polished and new. Hours later, Detective Shaw received an email from an encrypted address. Subject: "Stop digging." Attached was a photo of Jeffrey's property, taken that morning from a drone, even though the site was still under police guard. Another attachment contained coordinates 200 miles south, near the Kentucky border. Jeffrey begged Shaw not to go, but she had no choice. At the coordinates, they found a second burial site, identical soil composition, same industrial barrels, this time containing chemical waste marked with Coleman's old company logo. And another clue, a folded page from an HOA ledger, stamped with Evelyn's handwriting. They'll never find the rest. As the investigation widened, Shaw uncovered campaign contributions, falsified inspection records, and bank wires linking Coleman Environmental to multiple Ohio HOAs, all managed through a shell consultancy Evelyn helped establish. Every HOA had one thing in common: mysterious infrastructure upgrades that involved pouring concrete on select parcels. The concrete, it seemed, wasn't just symbolic control, it was concealment. Coleman's empire had been burying illegal waste beneath suburban developments for years, using HOA boards as fronts. Evelyn wasn't merely a fanatic. She was part of an organized cover-up stretching decades. Peter Marks, Evelyn's estranged husband, contacted Shaw through his attorney. He handed over an old safety deposit key and a trembling note from Evelyn dated months before the cement truck's incident. Peter, if anything happens, give this to a woman who asks about E47. Tell her it wasn't supposed to be this way. Tell her there's one more site, the real one. Inside the deposit box was a flash drive, encrypted files labeled Fairview Origin. Shaw's tech team decrypted it after 2 days. What they found chilled her. Blueprints of Maple Ridge Estates dated before construction, showing an unmarked sublevel chamber beneath Jeffrey's property, labeled Vault 1. By late summer, excavation teams returned to the site with federal oversight. They cut through the concrete slab layer by layer. Beneath it, after 20 feet, a hidden hatch emerged, corroded but intact. When opened, a stairwell descended into darkness. The air reeked of metal and decay. At the bottom, a small concrete room containing old monitoring equipment, lead line walls, and another drum, this one sealed and welded shut. Across the front, faded paint spelled CMB/Hazard Level 4. A label beneath it read, "Do not disturb, 1993 instant containment." The team withdrew and called in the hazmat specialists. As they began to lift the drum, one of the inspectors noticed something carved into the side. A name, E. Marks. 3 days later, security cameras at a rural gas station in Kentucky captured Evelyn Marks. Disheveled, wearing a hooded coat, she bought bottled water and prepaid fuel. The footage showed a man waiting by a black SUV, face obscured by sunglasses. Evelyn hesitated at the pump, then turned toward the camera as if looking directly through it. Her lips formed 3 words. They buried more. Then she got in the SUV and drove away. When agents arrived hours later, the attendant reported a strange chemical smell lingering after they left. The next night, Jeffrey woke to his phone buzzing. A message from an unknown number. "You think she was crazy? She was cleaning up our mess. Stay silent, or the next slab will have your name on it." Attached was a photo of Malik walking home from school. Jeffrey called Shaw in a panic. The FBI placed the family under protection, moving them again, undisclosed location. Shaw knew this was no longer a local case. Coleman's network had eyes everywhere. But she also knew something else. Evelyn's disappearance was an escape. It was a mission. In early autumn, while reviewing evidence boxes, Shaw found a spiral notebook tucked inside Evelyn's personal effects. The first line read, "If they find Vault 1, they'll come for Vault 2. Each entry detailed her guilt and fear. How she'd begged Coleman to exhume the barrels. How he'd laughed and said, "They're safer underground." The final page ended abruptly. "They think concrete seals everything. It doesn't. The ground remembers. And one day it will open." On October 19th at 3:14 a.m., an explosion ripped through an abandoned Ridgewood warehouse outside Cincinnati. Flames reached 50 feet high. Nearby residents were evacuated. Among the debris, investigators found fragments of computer equipment. And charred remains believed to be Caleb Knox, the construction executive who had helped Evelyn. In a locked safe partially melted by the fire was a hard drive labeled Vault 2 coordinates. But before it could be recovered, the structure collapsed again, swallowing the safe into molten rubble. 3 days later, satellite imagery revealed something startling. On the outskirts of a newly built subdivision in Kentucky, a fresh concrete foundation had appeared overnight, unregistered, unpermitted. Drone footage captured trucks similar to those used in the original Maple Ridge pour. On one of the trucks, barely visible through pixelation, a company logo appeared. CMB Logistics, a rebrand of Coleman's old enterprise. The site's listed project manager, E. Marks. Detective Shaw stared at the report in silence. Evelyn was alive, and she was pouring again. That evening, Shaw met Jeffrey at a secure facility. She laid out aerial photos, maps, and Evelyn's last known footage. "This isn't about your land anymore," she said. "It's about every neighborhood they built, Jeffrey leaned forward, eyes dark. Then we stopped them. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed, an encrypted alert from federal headquarters. Subject: new upload detected. Vault 2/live feed. On the screen appeared a dim underground tunnel. Camera swaying as someone walked through with a flashlight. At the end of the tunnel stood a woman, Evelyn Marks, her face half-lit, eyes wide. She whispered into the lens, "You were right, detective. There's something alive down here." The feed cut to static. Shaw froze, heart hammering. Jeffrey stared at her. Alive? The monitor flickered once more, just long enough for 3 words to appear in white text. Vault 3 activated. The morning after Angela Holloway's confession spread across Ridgewood Meadows like wildfire, the neighborhood felt quieter. The same silence that once followed the cement trucks, the grinding noise that tore through Jeffrey's mornings, now returned as an eerie calm. Angela had been taken in for questioning, her manicured hands trembling as she signed the Miranda form. Her perfect suburban world. The pearls, the HOA power, the whispering influence, crumbled faster than the cement she'd poured to destroy another man's dream. Jeffrey stood on his porch at dawn, watching a city inspector and a crew survey the damaged land. What was once a wide, fertile plot for his greenhouse was now a jagged, gray tomb of concrete. But beneath that grief, something stronger glowed: vindication. Officer Derek Sanders walked up the gravel drive, a case file tucked under his arm. His voice was low, deliberate. "Jeffrey, we confirmed it. Holloway diverted commercial cement deliveries through her husband's company accounts. She falsified work orders and bribed drivers to dump it overnight." Jeffrey exhaled slowly. "All that because she didn't want me here." Sanders nodded. "Because she didn't think you belonged here." The words lingered like smoke. In the sterile gray of the interrogation room, Angela Holloway sat opposite Captain Harlan Briggs and Detective Caitlin Moore. The cameras rolled, the clock ticked, and Angela's once cold confidence flickered. She started slow, at first denying, then deflecting, then finally unraveling. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she whispered, eyes rimmed red. He wouldn't listen. He wouldn't follow the rules. He kept that trailer, that ugly fence, and his soil bags right in view of my kitchen window. It wasn't about race. It was about order. But Caitlin's eyes narrowed. "You told the cement company to dump without a permit. You forged authorization. That's not about order, Angela. That's hate hiding in HOA paperwork." Angela flinched. "You think I hate him? I wanted him gone, yes, because he didn't understand how things worked here. I built this neighborhood's reputation. I built its standards. And then he bought that land and just stayed. No matter what we did." "What you did," Briggs corrected, leaning forward, "was a felony." Angela stared at her reflection in the mirror, her voice small. "I thought it would just scare him off." She didn't realize the cameras caught her tears not as remorse, but as realization. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the villain. By midweek, Ridgewood Meadows was split in two. Some residents whispered that Angela had gone too far. Others defended her, muttering that Jeffrey should have known better than to challenge the HOA. News crews lined the cul-de-sac. Microphones, drones, and reporters from Columbus to Cleveland covered the scandal. Caitlin Moore, now following the story as both detective and journalist, narrated on camera. What began as a property dispute has exposed the dark underbelly of suburban control, how the rules meant to protect could be twisted into weapons of exclusion. Jeffrey's neighbors, once silent, started speaking out. "I saw those trucks," said Marla Jensen, her cardigan pulled tight. But Angela said it was drainage work. She always had paperwork. She always had an answer. Even Paul Hendricks, the anxious HOA treasurer, turned himself in, admitting he'd approved budget allocations under Angela's instruction, fearing reprisal. It wasn't just a crime now. It was a reckoning. 6 months later, the case of State of Ohio versus Angela Holloway began under heavy media attention. Angela appeared pale. Her platinum bob dulled under the fluorescent lights. Her defense attorney argued stress, misunderstanding, and even claimed she was pressured by HOA duties and prescription medication. But the prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. falsified HOA records, bank transfers, and text messages to cement suppliers reading. Make it look like construction. No names. Done before sunrise. Jeffrey sat in the front row, silent. He didn't smile. He didn't flinch. When asked to testify, he spoke with quiet dignity. I moved here to build something good, to give my daughter a future. All I wanted was to be treated like any other homeowner. But some people only see what they want to see. The courtroom hung in that silence, a silence heavier than concrete. When the verdict came, guilty on count of criminal mischief, property destruction, and fraud, Angela collapsed into her husband's arms, sobbing. But the story didn't end there. A month after sentencing, Jeffrey received an unexpected letter. The return address, Franklin County Correctional Facility. It was from Angela Holloway. Jeffrey, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to understand, I wasn't always like this. Ridgewood became my world. The HOA gave me power, and I thought that power meant control. I wanted perfection so badly that I stopped seeing people as people. I'm sorry for what I took from you. I'm sorry for fear I caused. I pray you build again someday. Maybe then I'll find peace too. Jeffrey read the letter once, then again, then folded it quietly and tucked in a drawer. He didn't hate her anymore. Hate was heavy, like the cement she poured, and he'd carried enough of that weight already. Months passed. The land was still damaged, but new life crept through cracks in hardened concrete, weeds, moss, and a single wildflower. When a new community initiative started, led by Officer Derek Sanders and local volunteers, Jeffrey joined. They called it Rebuild Ridgewood. They repurposed parts of the concrete for benches, planters, and memorial stones, each piece engraved with one word: learn. Local schools began teaching the case in civics class, not as gossip, but as a lesson in power, prejudice, and accountability. Even the HOA board was restructured. No more private votes. No more secret fines. Transparency became the new rule. And on the anniversary of the incident, Jeffrey hosted a neighborhood dinner on his lawn, open to everyone. No fences. No divisions. It wasn't forgiveness. It was evolution. 3 months after Angela's letter, Caitlin Moore received a tip. An anonymous email. Checked the Holloway property. Backyard. Under the rose garden. She called Derek Sanders. They dug one quiet morning. Beneath the flower beds, perfectly arranged and meticulously maintained, lay a hidden box. Inside were copies of bank statements, lists of HOA members, and a series of unsigned letters threatening residents who had questioned Angela's leadership. Among them, one name stood out: E. Sloan. Detective Sanders' eyes narrowed. Edward Sloan, the auditor, the same shadowy figure tied to other HOA-linked manipulations across Ohio. Angela hadn't acted entirely alone. Someone had whispered in her ear, encouraged her extremism, used her pride to spark chaos. The true puppet master wasn't behind bars. He was still out there. A year later, Jeffrey stood at the edge of his property under the golden glow of evening. The land was slowly healing. Part grass, part stone, all his again. Caitlin parked nearby, handing him a folder. You were right. Sloan funded several HOA campaigns statewide. Angela's case, it might have just been one of many. Jeffrey looked out across the rebuilt community. So this was never just about me. No, Caitlin said softly. It's about how far control can go when no one stands up to it. He nodded, thoughtful. Then maybe it's time we start asking better questions. The wind rustled through the new saplings, carrying the sound of distant laughter. Children playing again in Ridgewood. In the end, justice didn't just mean a sentence. It meant reflection. It meant every neighbor looking at their own hands, wondering what silence had cost them. Angela Holloway served 5 years. Upon release, she reportedly moved to another town under a new name. No more HOA boards. No more rules. Jeffrey rebuilt. Not everything, but enough to start again. And Ridgewood Meadows, once a symbol of exclusivity, became a place where people finally started talking to each other. The story of the cement trucks became legend, a cautionary tale told over backyard fences. Power without empathy is just another form of destruction. As the camera fades on Ridgewood's quiet streets, the narrator's voice returns, calm, reflective, unsettling. When control turns to cruelty, when rules become weapons, and when silence becomes complicity, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up, or watched the trucks roll in?